The morning sun filtered weakly through the tall arched windows of the school hall, casting pale light upon rows of wooden benches. The room was simple but stern, bare stone walls, a crucifix above the doorway, shelves lined with worn manuscripts, and a single blackboard at the front. On the benches sat a dozen young women, each with quills, inkpots, and parchment spread before them. The air was filled with the soft scratching of pens and the faint murmurs of students reciting their Latin verses. At the head of the hall stood their mistress. She was a woman of commanding presence, clothed in a dark green gown with a long black cloak sweeping about her heels. In her right hand she carried a slender cane, polished from years of use. Her eyes were sharp, ever watchful, and the mere tap of her cane against the floor could silence the entire room. To her, learning was not a privilege but a duty, and idleness was treated with no less severity than disobedience. Among the students was one who stood apart, not by excellence, but by her constant failure. She was 20 years of age, older than many of the girls, yet no wiser for her years. Her beige dress was faded from wear, her apron patched, and her hair loosely tied, strands falling untidily across her face. While the others bent earnestly over their work, she often stared out the window, her eyes drifting to the courtyard beyond, where birds hopped upon the grass and servants went about their errands. Her parchment bore the evidence of neglect, smeared ink, blotted words, and half-formed letters. The mistress had observed her many times, and each time her patience wore thinner. That day was no ordinary lesson. It was a day of examination. One by one, each girl was summoned to the front of the hall to recite her passage or solve the sum set before them. The atmosphere was heavy with nerves, even the diligent whispered their notes under their breath, hoping not to falter. When the idle girl's turn came, she rose sluggishly from her bench, her parchment clutched in trembling hands. Her heart beat fast, though not from effort but from dread. She knew she had not studied enough, that her work was poor, yet some foolish hope whispered that perhaps she might escape unnoticed. She stood before the mistress, who looked upon her with expectant eyes. The girl opened her mouth. The Latin words stumbled from her lips, twisted and broken. She mispronounced even the simplest phrases, skipping lines, faltering, then falling silent altogether. A hush spread across the room. From the benches came the faint rustle of skirts and the shifting of eyes. Some students hid their faces, unwilling to meet the mistress's gaze, while others smirked behind their hands, enjoying her humiliation. The mistress's face hardened. Slowly, she rose from her seat, the cane in her hand tapping once, sharply, against the floor. The girl's legs felt heavy as she stepped closer, each pace echoing in the silent hall. She stopped before the mistress, her head bowed, her parchment slipping from her nervous grip. "Mistress," voice ringing in the chamber. "At 20 years of age, you fail at what children of 12 can master. Week after week you bring shame to your lessons. I have given you patience, and you have repaid it with idleness. No longer." The girl's lips trembled. She longed to beg forgiveness, to offer excuses, that she was tired, that her mind was slow, that she would try harder tomorrow. But no words came. The weight of her failure pressed upon her, and the stern eyes of her mistress left no room for plea. The mistress raised the cane, its polished surface gleaming in the light. "Mistress, you will be corrected, for your own sake, and as a lesson to all who sit here." A murmur ran through the benches. The other students straightened, their hearts racing. They had seen punishments before, yet each time the sound of the cane struck them with fresh fear. The mistress pointed to the wooden desk at the front. "Mistress," the girl froze. For a brief moment, shame and terror rooted her to the floor. But the authority in the mistress's voice compelled her. Slowly, with trembling hands, she leaned forward, gripping the edge of the desk. Her faded beige dress stretched tight across her frame, her breath shallow and quick. The mistress stood behind her, raising the cane high. The room held its breath. Crack, the first stroke fell, sharp and echoing against the stone walls. The girl gasped, her body jolting, her knuckles widening as she clutched the desk. Crack. A second blow followed, harsher, and a cry broke from her lips. Crack. Again the cane descended, precise and merciless, each stroke burning the lesson deeper. The hall was silent save for the echo of wood striking and the muffled cries of the punished. The students sat rigid, their quills stilled, their eyes wide. Some winced at each crack, others dared not look at all, but all felt the weight of the warning. At last, the mistress lowered her cane. Mistress, to the class, let this be remembered. Diligence is honor, idleness is disgrace. None among you shall waste the gift of learning. The girl straightened slowly, her cheeks wet with tears, her face hot with shame. She dared not meet the eyes of her classmates. Gathering her parchment with trembling hands, she returned to her bench, sitting stiffly, her head bowed. The mistress resumed her place at the front. With a sharp nod, she commanded the class to continue. The scratching of quills began anew, though now more careful, more deliberate than before. Every stroke of ink upon parchment carried the echo of the cane in their minds. The punished girl bent her head over her work, tears still glistening on her lashes. For the first time, her quill moved steadily, her letters formed with trembling care. She had learned, not from books or parchment, but from pain and shame, that in this school, negligence would not be excused. And so the lesson was carved not only into her flesh but into the memory of all who sat in that hall. In the mistress's school, poor grades and laziness were not merely failures. They were offenses, and they were answered with the cane.